computer and hope that it works. Okay, action, we're recording. So thank you guys for taking a few minutes to call into this. Like I said, I don't think it's gonna go a full hour, but hopefully we can get some good conversation in and answer any questions you might have. Just, I guess, a little bit of background on me as to why, what even gives me the right to talk about this stuff, right? So I've been a nurse for 16 years. I started in like open heart surgery, and then I went from the adults to the kids because adults are really hard to deal with. They're not nearly as resilient as kids or forgiving. So then I went to pediatrics, and I worked in pediatrics for a few years. And I would say even like in nursing school, I was feeling a little bit conflicted about a lot of the stuff that happens in nursing. I've always kind of had like a little bit of a hippie vibe, I guess you could say. Like, my grandmother was one to mix up all kinds of lotions and potions. So I had a little bit of that in me. And then when I ended up in pediatrics and I was seeing these kids, like we dosed them with antibiotics, like left, right, and center. A kid would come from a community hospital and he had fallen off the couch, but we wouldn't wait for the CAT scan to come in. We would do another CAT scan. And like a lot of that stuff just it didn't feel right to me. So after a couple years in PD, I ended up moving to the insurance company. And then in the insurance company, I got to see like under the covers and like how this stuff really worked. And I ended up in a program where we basically would incentivize doctors to do things and, all kinds of things from colonoscopies to mammograms. I worked with a ton of pediatricians, and vaccines was a big money maker. We would basically pay doctors. The more vaccines they gave, the more kids that they had compliant, the more money they would get. And I was bringing checks out to pediatricians for $100,000, on a yearly basis. So I started to see how much of a conflict there was. And I started to have my own little internal conflict, because when I was in PD, I dealt with kids that had vaccine reactions. I knew what that stuff was like. And then I knew the doctors would never like, oh, that's just normal. They're supposed to get a rash. They're supposed to have fevers, and it never set right. So then one day I was in a meeting for one of the bigger entities. Sonia, you would know them because you're in Jersey. One of the biggest hospital systems in the state. We were having a meeting, and I already knew this had happened, but a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, a fellow nurse, had lost her son after his DTaP vaccine. And she and I were in the trenches together. And the day that I found out that her son passed away, and she wasn't quite sure what it was, and then she started putting the pieces together, and the timing was just perfect. So it was a few months after that, and I was in this meeting with this big hospital system, and here I am trying to push vaccines on these, you got to get your numbers up, you got to get your numbers up. And the one doctor said, oh, well, we just had a nurse lose her son, and she's saying that it's because of the vaccines. And I was like, oh, I just felt that's such a weight on me, because here I am like putting the pieces together. I'm out there pushing doctors to give vaccines so that they can make more money. And here my friend just lost her son because of a vaccine. So I literally at that moment, I decided, you know what, I can't do this anymore. Like I need to, for the next year, I planned my way out. And that's actually when I met Deb, because we went into the whole nursing advocacy thing. So that's kind of how I got to the point of being so passionate about, vaccine choice. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I don't necessarily, if I had my own kids, I probably wouldn't vaccinate them. But I think everyone should have a choice. When it comes to medical stuff, everyone should have a choice. Sorry, Mario's coming in there. Mario, can you hear me? All right, we'll give him a second to scoot in, and I'll keep going. So, and don't hesitate, if you guys want to interrupt and ask questions, please feel free to do so. I'm usually pretty good at staying on point, but so anyway, that was kind of the moment where I was like, wow, I can't keep doing what I'm doing. I need to find something else. So for like a year, I kind of planned my exit from the insurance company. And I ended up going to another company for a period of time, and then I just left altogether. I call it my midlife retirement. I just quit. And I moved away for a while, and then I traveled for a while, and I just the whole time my brain's kind of working, and for what, the universe, whatever, put some certain things in my path that kind of led me down this, to get an understanding of, a better understanding of how the law works and how, what our rights are. And just a real quick snippet of what that was. Like, so COVID started and all these people are running around masked and everyone's like locking themselves in their houses. And like, I knew just from the basics of nursing, like you don't quarantine someone just because you tell them that they have to quarantine. Like there's a court order that has to go into place and there's a process. So to see everyone locking themselves in their houses and putting masks on, I was like, wow, this is really interesting. But that just forced me to dig deeper into a lot of the law. And then my uncle ended up in this horrendous landlord-tenant dispute. And my uncle's a 67-year-old contractor. Like he doesn't know the legal system. He's not interested in knowing it, but this issue was really like wearing him down. So it's like, Uncle Dave, I'll help you out. So I started figuring out how to like deal with court stuff. And that's when I got hooked up with this other person. I know Jim knows Alphonse. He's actually a guy out in Pennsylvania who is like a legal expert. So I gave him a call and he's like, here, do this, this, and this. He literally told me like 3 things to do. In the middle of a pandemic, my uncle and I managed to get somebody evicted, which is like unheard of. So I was like, holy crow, like this stuff really works. Like if you know how to apply it, it really works. And then I had an issue with, so I don't have health insurance since I left my job at the insurance company. I know a thing or two about health insurance and I was like, heck no, I'm gonna stay away from that for a little while. So I don't have health insurance. So the state of New Jersey was going to fine me. They call it a shared responsibility payment. They were gonna basically fine me like $1,800 for not having health insurance. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I haven't used the system. I take care of myself. If I do need something, I'm gonna I'll negotiate with someone and I'll pay out of pocket. Heaven forbid something emergent happens, I'll deal with it. But so I called Alphonse and I'm like, hey, can you help me deal with this? He's like, yeah. So we typed up an affidavit and we sent it to the New Jersey Division of Taxation. I sent it. And like 5 days later, I get this thing in the mail that says, guess what, Jessica, you had health insurance for 2009. They magically like made this document appear. So I was like, wow, that if you know how to use the system will work for you. You just have to know who you are and you have to know the rules of the game. Like you wouldn't walk into, a fencing match not knowing the rules of the game. You have to know the rules. So that really kind of piqued my interest and started me down this road of like heavy duty learning about rights and where they come from and how to use them and how the legal system functions, because it doesn't make sense that you or I can't just, we get into a car accident or whatever, heaven forbid. It doesn't make sense that we can't just figure it out on our own. We have to go hire an attorney, and attorneys cost a lot of money. And then, what if I can't afford an attorney? Does that mean I'm not going to get a good defense because I can't afford a good attorney? So the whole process just doesn't make sense. And I started digging, and it's not supposed to work that way. We're supposed to be able to get justice, just as easily as the next person without all of this jargon and craziness. So that was kind of a long story short to say that in order to handle the vaccine stuff, them trying to push all these medical interventions on us, we have to know who we are. We have to know where our rights come from. We have to know it to our core, and we have to be able to articulate it in our paperwork and, in our energy. I mean, that sounds woo-woo for some people, but once you know it, like you feel it, you just get this feeling like I'm untouchable. Like, it's given me so much hope learning all this stuff, because I really feel like no matter what comes at me at this point, I know I can handle it because I know who I am and I know how to stand my ground when it comes to certain things. And it's especially important, I think, because it's our children, our college age kids and our school age kids that are being attacked right now. It's so important for them to know this stuff, because this is going to change their life going forward. So while I'm here talking to you guys and your parents or aunts or uncles or whatever, it's important to share these kind of concepts with your kids as well, because this is stuff that they're going to have to know as they get older. But that being said, it's not just a process where I send you a document and you cut and paste your name into it and you send it off and it works. Because like I said, I really do feel like it's an energetic process. If you want to call me crazy, that's fine. But there's a certain amount of energy that goes into it when you understand what it is that you're doing. Anybody have any questions? I'm going to take a breath.
Yes, did you ever see that document that Nurse J, I think she was, did on Crow? It was a statement of declination.
Yes.
You see that?
I'm going to, so I mixed a bit of her stuff with some of Alphonse's stuff and so there's all these, I shouldn't say there's all these, they're probably like maybe 5 or 6 people that are really well known in this kind of arena of law, and they all have somewhat of a different approach, but I've kind of taken bits and pieces from each of them and made a conglomerate of all of it. And I'm going to share the documents with you in a minute, but there's one woman that in the midst of all this COVID craziness, she was a nurse in a hospital and they were trying to force her actually to get the flu shot. And she used a few of these tactics and was able to decline the flu shot, and they didn't fire her. You know, she was a contract nurse, so they didn't like end her contract or anything early. So the proof is in the pudding. But let me just say this, I don't have kids. I have 3 nieces, and you know, one's college age, the other 2 are in elementary school. You know, we intend on using these documents for my nieces, but I haven't actually used them in the school setting. I just sent some, I'll share them with you in a second. I just sent some stuff off to Whole Foods because Whole Foods has been harassing me. They had a policy where you didn't have to wear a mask. And then all of a sudden I went in one day and the manager came up to me and she's like, "Where's your mask? Where's your mask?" I said, "I've shopped here a number of times without a mask. What happened?" And she's like, "Oh, well, our policy changed." I said, "You know, your policy can't just change overnight." So we went back and forth and she was very nice about it. But I said, "Look, I just want to let you know, I'm going to go through the process. I am sending affidavits to, you know, leadership. And so I'll show you those because I think that will kind of be, I don't know, maybe some credibility for you guys, because they should get there either today or tomorrow, and then they have 10 days to respond. So we can kind of see together if it's going to work with something like, you know, corporate Whole Foods. But once you see the documents, you'll kind of see how I think they're kind of bulletproof. I mean, and Alphonse, the guy that we talked to in Pennsylvania, he's used these things on traffic stops, tax issues, sewer, but like he's got the court in Pennsylvania running scared from him because he's been super successful. You know, that being said, nothing's guaranteed. I'm in no way, shape, or form an attorney. I'm just learning and sharing what I know with you guys. But at this point, like, you know, yesterday they knocked down the religious exemption in Connecticut. And I was mentioning this when we first came on, but I'll say it again. The trouble with religious exemptions or medical exemptions, anytime you say I am exempt from something, it means that it's valid for everyone else. It's just not valid for me for this reason. So as soon as they take that exemption away, like they just did in Connecticut yesterday, that means you're now fair game. I mean, those folks thankfully were grandfathered in, but their little brothers and sisters, you know, that are coming up that aren't in school yet, they're not exempt. So that's why I feel it's so important to stand on your rights as opposed to standing on any kind of exemption. Yeah, any questions about that? Have you guys had like religious exemptions or what?
We haven't. Our daughter's going to be entering middle school, so there's a few mandatory, and I think we're kind of at the point where we don't want to vaccinate anymore.
Right.
So that's why we were kind of like, oh, do we do the religious exemption or how would that work? But then when we discussed it with you, you were kind of like, you know, that gets taken away. Like Connecticut, it's the same situation.
Yeah.
Kind of like figuring out, you know, what's the best, you know, foot forward in terms of, you know, because you know it's going to be a fight and you know it's going to be an ongoing fight. So, you know, what method or what tactic to use has, you know, the longevity or the wherewithal to actually be impactful, right? I mean, that's the name of the game, right?
Exactly. You don't want to have to keep, every month or every, couple months, you need to get a new exemption, or now it's, now it's only this particular piece of the pie that's exempt. And then you've got to jump through hoops to get somebody to sign a medical exemption or something. That's, it's so much easier just to say, look, this is who I am. This isn't the body. There is no way you're forcing me to do anything. Like, it just doesn't make sense that someone can force you to do something to your body that you don't want to do, and it's very clear in the statutes even that the only, like I said, the only way you can quarantine someone is with a court order. The only one you actually can't force anyone to vaccinate. In the state law, you cannot force anyone to vaccinate. If you're feeling like they need to be quarantined, you quarantine them for a period of time until they're well, and then you let them go. You can't. So this whole forced vaccination thing is crap.
Mhm.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen here quick.
So I just want to make a comment, and I know this family probably is aware of it, but the NVIC, which is National Vaccine Information Center, I have a daughter who's 37, and I didn't vaccinate her 37 years ago, and it's all because of the woman who started that, because her child had a reaction to DPT. And so I encourage people to also go there and look, because she has since become a lawyer, and she has since, I mean, she's got the strongest. They've tried to take her down, especially right now. But I didn't have any problem. I actually moved across the country because I wanted to come to Washington, because I was able to have both philosophical and religious exemption here. It no longer is the case. But I think things are much tougher now. And I absolutely agree with Jess that just because of it's venomous now. When you go to deal with your exemptions, it's not like it was for me, which was I had to say to the ignorant person at the front desk of the school, turn the paper over. It shows on the back that I'm allowed this exemption, so my daughter did not get vaccines. Oh, okay, and that was it. That's not where it is today. So I think she's right on that. You can't. We've got to act completely. So.
Now, who was the lady that you were speaking of that's an attorney now off of that site?
You there, Deb? I think you might be cutting out. I think you said NVIC.
Barbara Lowe Fisher.
Barbara Lowe Fisher. Okay.
Thank you so much.
And she's the person at the vaccine NVIC, National Vaccine Information Center. Right. And she founded it, and she went on to get her law degree. And she if you go today to her website, she has an excellent podcast on how we're being bamboozled on it.
Yeah, no doubt.
And it's very factual.
So
Everything's referenced and researched.
you're cutting in and out. I'm sorry. It sounds like you're saying that everything is really well supported by research. All right. And to that point, some of you kind of might know my story as far as my stint as a school nurse. I worked for, during the whole COVID craziness, I went, I was not.
I'm not saying anything.
Oh, okay. I think we're on a delay. I wasn't looking for a school nurse position. It wasn't in any way, shape, or form my intention.
It is. Yeah, she's very, very clear with her research.
Awesome. I think there's a bit of a delay. So anyhow, somebody I know works in the school system. They desperately needed a school nurse. They called me. I said, what do I got to lose? So I went in and did the whole school nurse thing. But I can tell you, seeing the back end of it, like all the stuff that goes on with the vaccine, the immunization records, and like keeping up on all those exemptions. It's one of their main focuses. And I started there in September, and I think it was sometime in the spring that the state actually comes in and reviews all the exemptions, and they were already starting to prepare for it in September, because they really make sure that their, you know, T's are crossed and their I's are dotted. So they're getting much more restrictive about who they accept as far as exemptions go, and it can't just be like some little letter anymore. So they're definitely buckling down here in New Jersey. And just, you know, last year we all rallied in Trenton trying to keep our religious exemption. So there's no doubt that it's being attacked, and it's a spiritual attack for sure. So let me just share kind of this little ditty with you here, because this I think explains. Can you see this? It says divinity at the top.
Yes.
Right. So again, I wasn't raised with a religion. I wasn't really ever a super religious person, but going through this process has definitely made me spiritual, let's say, because once you realize that your rights come from a higher power, like there's really no other way to look at it, because if my rights come from another man or woman, that means I'm essentially a slave. They can tell me what to do. You know, if my rights come from someone with a title, you know, then they have to come from something greater than us. And because they do, that means we're divine too. So whatever created us, you know, we man, woman, people, you know, we essentially created everything else, you know, and how can anything that we created ever be greater than us? It's virtually impossible. So that is the core of what we need to know about where our rights come from. And anytime you're confused about it, anytime you're in Whole Foods and someone is telling you to put a mask on, you just say to yourself, like, if I was on a desert island, like, and it was just me and this person telling me to put a mask on, does that person have more rights than me? How can they tell me to put a mask on? We have the same amount of rights. They have no authority over me. And I have no contract with them. Like, I never signed on the dotted line saying that I'm gonna, you know, follow the rules of Whole Foods, because Whole Foods it's a public accommodation, just like every school is a public accommodation. So when you kind of understand this hierarchy, you know, divinity first, they created man, woman, people. And then we, you know, men, women, people, mostly men, created the Constitution. But, you know, you've got the articles and the amendments, the federal government was created, state government, and then all this other stuff. So schools are down here somewhere, you know, and schools, when you're a man or woman that goes to a school, you're called a student. But just because you're a student doesn't mean you're no longer a man or a woman. So you can have two titles at the same time, or two, I don't want to say two titles, but you can have, you know, you are a man and then you have a couple other titles, you know, whether it be if you choose to be a taxpayer, if you choose to be a resident, those are all just legal terms that they stick to us in order to give us the illusion that they have some kind of power over us. But if you always go back to the point that you are a man or woman first, there is no one that can tell you what to do. We weren't, if you look here, like, we're above all this stuff that we would call government. When they created the government, or when they created the Constitution, it was essentially to keep the government in a fence. It wasn't meant to control the people, but they found ways to manipulate it. And I'm not saying it's bad. I mean, government, if it's done correctly and if the laws are applied correctly, it really works well. Like, our Constitution is an amazing document if it's used correctly, but we experience it every day now, how much they've perverted, you know, and abused the power, you know, that they think they have, but they don't. So just keep that in mind. You know, we're men and women first. We've got the Constitution. The Constitution is a great set of laws. It's important to know the Constitution. They don't teach us this stuff in school anymore because they really don't want us to know it. But then we've got the court that sits over here outside of all that, because that's where we're supposed to be able to get justice. And me or you or anybody else is supposed to be able to walk into court and get justice knowing what we know, like not having to hire an attorney and go through all kinds of hoops and spend a whole bunch of money. It doesn't make sense. Does anybody have any questions about any of this stuff? Alrighty. let me show you another document. All right, so that being said, let me find affidavit of status. Here we go. All right. You see a document, oh, that's not the right one. What are you guys seeing right now?
Barney Rubble.
Barney Rubble.
It is definitely Barney Rubble. Let me see if I can find the right one. Oh, goodness. Sorry. Thank you for your patience. All right, let me go down here and find it. There it is. All right, now I can see what you're saying. Barney Rubble, it says affidavit of status at the top, right? Okay, so keep in mind what I said earlier. I'm not a super religious person, but our Constitution is, our entire system of law is based on the Bible. And it just, that's the way it is. We're a country based in, you know, Christianity, and so much of our laws, you know, are reflective of things that come from the Bible. And it all goes back to, you know, English time and common law. So these are things that have been inherited since, you know, the 1200s. Like the Magna Carta was probably the first real written, you know, legal attempt at creating, you know, some type of government. So when I was talking to Alphonse and we were doing that tax document, he said, the first thing you got to do is an affidavit of status. And he sent me this and I was like, oh boy, like this is a lot of like Christian stuff. And I don't even know, like, I can't quote the Bible. I don't need, and so there has to be a little bit, and no pun intended, a little bit of a leap of faith when it comes to this stuff. But now that I've been working in it, I'm like, wow, like this stuff is super powerful. And I'll send these all to you when we're done. But basically this top paragraph is just saying, look, this is me. I am a woman. I am not a citizen. I'm not a student. I'm not a resident. I might function as those things sometimes, but that is not who I am. So can the superintendent come to your house and tell your kid to put a mask on while he's sitting on the couch? No, because he's your son first, and he's a little man first. He's a student second, you know, and when he goes to school, he doesn't lose his manhood, his manliness, or, you know, like he's always a little man first. Just because he's going to school and becoming a student doesn't mean he's giving up his rights as a little man.
Hey,
So
Jess, can I ask one
absolutely, go for it,
one
Rich.
quick question? So I've seen these before, and I see kind of the flow of the way that it's written, and it's being written in the first person, but as you know, in other words, how would it be written differently for a minor where it's not written in the first person like that?
Awesome question.
Like an affidavit of status for our children, basically, right?
So it's a perfect question, and I'm absolutely going to get to it. It's a little further down in one of the points, but
Okay.
I won't miss it because it's super important for you guys to know it. And there's actually another point to note in that area as well. So this top part is just saying, like, look, here's where law comes from. The law is based in the Bible, you know, and there's actually federal regulation that says, you know, our law is based in the Bible. So that's kind of where this top section is coming from. I'm a woman. I am a people of the United States. I'm not a citizen. I'm not a resident. I'm just a woman who was born in the United States. I'm a living, breathing, sentient being. And the reason that that's important to say is because if you look up the definition of person in any legal dictionary, it's going to tell you that a person includes corporations, you know, individuals, sole proprietorships, you know, all these other dead entities are also considered persons. So anytime you're reading law or statutes or anything, and you see the word person, they're not necessarily talking about the living man or woman. So that's why it is essential to identify yourself as a living natural creation of God, because there you are, you're divine, you're not an artificial person. You know, these next points are about, you know, where, you know, the authority of the government is meant to contain the government, and we the people gave the government the authority to put that fence around government. The fence was never meant to be around us, you know, the people. We're supposed to be the ones controlling the circus. They're not supposed to be controlling us. So here, I reserve and claim all of my God-given rights. I waive none of them ever. You know, you always see, you know, we see it all the time, all rights reserved on the bottom, a little thing. And you're like, what does that mean? Well, a lot of those corporations know what they're doing by signing that. It's something we need to get into the habit of, because if you don't reserve your rights, if you don't claim your rights, if you don't know your rights, then you don't have any. So there's just some more. Point 5 here is talking about the supremacy clause in the Constitution, which basically says the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. If any state state code or state statute, if any of those things conflict with the federal government, with the Constitution, the state law, the state statute is null and void. It has no standing because it's already in conflict with the Constitution. The Constitution is meant to be kind of this broad, you know, these broad guidelines, basically. They protect our rights, and they're not meant to get into all the little details. The state code and the state statutes, they do get into all those little details, but if any of those little details conflict with the big umbrella, like, they have no standing. So that's when we got to dig into a lot of these statutes, and we'll do that too. I'll show you some of their trickery, but that's basically just highlighting the fact that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. It's not where our rights come from, because our rights come from God. The Constitution just secures our rights so that these little shysters don't step on them. All right, so I think, let me just get down to this. This talks a little more about, you know, that court that I was talking about, the court that sits outside of the government. That's an Article 3, Section 2 court, which is, it's very carefully defined in the Constitution. Hopefully you never have to deal with one of them. And if you do, by then, hopefully I know a little more about this stuff so I can help you through it. But there's administrative courts, which is what I went through with my uncle, which they're called, you know, Alphonse calls them kangaroo courts. It literally is the kangaroo court. Like, it was the most ridiculous, sad, dysfunctional experience I've had in a long time. And it gives me no faith in our system. But then to realize that, wow, if you know what you're doing, you can really just kind of, you know, corral these kangaroos. But the Article 3, Section 2 court is the real deal. That's the way it's meant to be. There, if you think about this, right? We talk about a jury trial, like Chauvin had a jury trial couple, you know, last week or whatever. That's very different than a trial by jury. If you're having a jury trial, that means the judge is sitting up there and he's the one that's kind of got control of the show. If you're having a trial by jury, that means the jury is deciding the law and they're deciding the verdict, where, you know, it's different, it's sneaky, very sneaky, but very different. So Article 3 courts are trial by jury, a jury of your peers. And I'm going off on a tangent here, but this stuff gets me all amped up. So where is the piece about, is it here? So Rich, to answer your question, and I'm a little bit lost right now on the specifically where it is in the document. So my document is a little different because I don't have kids. I could list my property in here. So up until your kids are of 18 years old, up until they're considered, you know, adults legally, they are your property. It sounds a little harsh, but you know, there is no property more important to you than your children. And whenever you're talking about your children, your offspring, in like a lawful manner, you call them your offspring and you claim them as your property. Because if someone trespasses on your property, that's all you, like I've been hearing, so in the advocacy stuff I've been doing a lot lately, what's happening in Jersey Shore University Medical Center, they are keeping mamas from their babies, you know, because of all this craziness. Mom delivers the baby, they whisk them away to the NICU and they start doing all these tests. And, you know, I've had so many moms reach out to me, no less than 3 moms in the last 3 weeks, where their babies have been taken from them and they're doing things to them without any consent. And that is, I can't even tell you how wrong that is. So I told one of the moms, I said, this is the only sentence that needs to come out of your mouth. That son or daughter is my property. You are trespassing on my property. I demand to have my property returned to me. And the one woman that did it, it worked. Like that one sentence is all you need. It's my property and you're trespassing on it. Those are very strong words when it comes to lawful stuff. So when you're filling out this affidavit of status, and I can make some edits so that you can squeeze, your kids in there. You don't even have to put their names in there. It's just, you claim your children as your property. I don't know if you're familiar with like a power of attorney. Basically, when you get a power of attorney, a general power of attorney, you're able to make decisions for people. Like you could literally, if you had a power of attorney for your brother or sister, you could like get married for them. You could buy a house in their name. You could like buy a car, whatever. So this is essentially, it is as strong as a power of attorney. Some people won't recognize it as such because it's not in the typical format. But as soon as you put your children in here as your property, that gives you the power to claim them as your property and to make decisions as if their body was your body or your body was their body. The one thing I will say is I've been in situations in the hospital where, a kid literally turned 18 a week before and, got into a terrible accident and, the mom comes in the door and the doc's like, sorry, I can't give you any information. The kid's unresponsive and, we can't give you any information because he's 18. And like that stuff breaks my heart. So I tell everyone, power of attorneys or affidavit status, these things aren't just for old people. They're for parents with kids too, because we want Go ahead, Deb.
Well, but realize too, and I know Jess knows this, but I had to work with the nursery. And when parents did stand up like this, we had the sheriff called, we had CPS workers come, we had forced cesareans. It is not a pleasant experience. I'm not telling anyone not to do it at all. I'm saying just be ready. And that's the spiritual part that Jessica's referring to. This has to be in your absolute soul. And I know where Jessica is because I worked as a midwife for 30 years and I had to have it in my soul and my convictions that what I shared with this family was right and that it was their rights. And so I could stand up behind them. And so just be aware, it could easily happen in the emergency room. It could easily happen in a clinic somewhere, in a hospital room. But that doesn't mean you don't still have this right.
Absolutely. And they, in some situations, and what I'm hearing now is they really do test you and they put you through your paces. And that's why it's so important to think about this stuff now when, we're not in an emergency. I see your hand up, Rich, go for it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't mean to keep interrupting.
Oh, no.
Is the argument against this that these rights are either reduced or manipulated because of any emergency status that we find are in? I mean, isn't that the whole thing that's going on right now? It's like, well, we're in a pandemic, we're in a state of emergency or whatever. I mean, how does that layered on top of this change the exercising of these rights?
So what I've been hearing from the moms that are experiencing this, the two of them did test positive for COVID. So they had taken the baby away because supposedly they needed to be quarantined. Now, that baby just came out of my loins. It's been exposed to what it's going to be exposed to. There is no, if I were at home with my child, you couldn't just walk in my door and take my kid. Like you'd need a court order. That doesn't change when you get to the hospital, but they're trying to use these, these scare tactics to compel people to agree to it. So, and what Deb is saying, like, you're right. If there is an emergency, if the doctor really feels like a cesarean is absolutely necessary and they're going to go through the whole like ethics and all that stuff, and they'll have to, you make them run through their paces as far as getting a court order, because at the end of the day, it's your decision. And just like, so why is it that when a Jehovah's Witness, like in pediatrics, I deal with this too, Jehovah's Witnesses that don't want blood transfusions, we don't have to call the sheriff because we've been down this road before. So the more we do this, the more we claim our rights, the more we go in with a plan from day one, and what I'm encouraging, and Deb, I'm actually going to chat with you a little more about this at some point. I'm encouraging a lot of moms to have a birth plan and to have an affidavit of status and like an affidavit of fact that says, look, here is my birth plan. Before I even end up in labor, these are the expectations. This is how things are going to go down. It's basically like having an advance directive for your birth. This, I don't want vaccinations. I don't want the cord clamped. I don't want this. I don't want that. Like putting all those things in a list so that before anything happens, you've got it there in writing, and there isn't going to be a need to call the sheriff because we've already gone over this. Now that's not possible in an emergent situation, but just even thinking through it all will better prepare you for it. Did that answer your question, Rich?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, Rich, were you saying like just everything we've been experiencing, they're trying to use an emergency to basically overstep the Constitution is what they're doing? Is that what you were saying? Because like everything we've been seeing for the last year, like, everybody keeps saying law, everybody keeps saying mandate, but everything we read is an order. Nothing says, mandate from the governor, mandate from the Secretary of Health, that it says order. And the legal description of an order, doesn't carry any law. It's there to be encouraged and persuaded to follow an order. But they're trying to say that they can do all these things to us and they're crushing the Constitution, when in all reality, they would have to pass a law with 37 states agreeing to it. Is that the truth, Jess? Or am I off base there?
No, you're absolutely true. And then even then, even if they still pass the law, you still got to prove that it applies to me as a woman, way up here. I'm not.
I know a lot of business owners, a lot of friends and family owned businesses, and they were just shutting their doors, completely complying with an order out of ignorance and out of social shaming. They would close their door, and some of them ended up losing their businesses because they were just ignorant of the fact that this order didn't carry any legal weight. It was there to persuade or encourage. Yes, they're going to send the health department, they're going to send the Department of Agriculture to your business, but it doesn't carry any weight. What's the one gym in New Jersey, that Attila's gym?
Mm-hmm. And there's
went
actually
through all that.
a business I go to. I visit them when I go down to see the donkeys because they're just around the corner. But there's a gentleman there that from day one, he runs a restaurant and it's like a antique shop.
Mm-hmm.
Never done masks. He's never, his staff isn't masked. The police have been out there 5 different times. The health department's been out there twice. And I said, how are you getting through this? He said, Jess, I know my rights. And he said, they come out here, they tell me what they have to tell me. I explain to them my standing and they go away. It's like, it's doable. Actually, Sonia, I don't know, you're not too far from Wall Township. It's Allenwood General Store. If you get a chance, it's cute.
Yes.
Yeah, they're awesome.
I think I saw you posting about it too. We had to stop by there.
Right. So here's
Is that in Tom's River?
It's
Tom's River, yeah.
It's a little north of there. It's Wall Township, like Belmar.
Yeah, it's about 20. It's about 20 minutes north of Tom's River.
Okay.
So here's that piece. Persons. When I was saying, persons aren't living people. Municipal corporations, private corporations. They have no interest in my private property. So up at the top, you would list, somewhere in here you would list that your private property is, your children. And some people even put like their personal address, I'm the holder in due course of my house at such and such, of my car. So all that stuff is listed. So the importance of this affidavit, and affidavits go back as long as law exists. There's always been affidavits, and we've kind of forgotten the power of them. It basically just takes, it's a document. It has to have certain parts and pieces. You have to say that you're of sound mind and that you're swearing under the penalty of perjury, and it has to be notarized. So actually this little part down here, the notary, whenever he or she goes to notarize it, they'll look for all these particular pieces because they have to make sure they're there. But essentially what you're saying is, look, I will stand up in a court of law and testify to everything that is in this document. So that is why, like Deb was saying, and I'm saying, it's a it's a spiritual thing. Like, you need to know this stuff. You need to be able to talk about it from, you know, a place of honesty and sincerity. You need to, you know, own these things. It's not something you just put your signature on and, you know, it magically makes things go away. So that's the power of the affidavit. The other thing that's important about an affidavit is an unrebutted affidavit stands as fact. So when you send someone an affidavit, there are people that use this affidavit as their identification, and they don't use their driver's license. They just use the affidavit. Some people even put a picture on it. So they get pulled over and the cop is like, you know, identify yourself. And they hand them the affidavit of status, and the cop is like, what is this? It's a piece of paper. And he's like, you know, I want your driver's license. And they end up in this whole thing. But then, you know, he'll say, you know, keep the affidavit and you have to rebut it in 10 days or else it's true. So if you don't come back and say each one of these points are false, and here it says here, please advise me in written affidavit form within 10 days of receipt hereof, providing me your counter affidavit, proving with particularity by stating all requisite. But basically, you need to rebut each one of these things point for point, or else they are absolutely true. They stand as fact. If this were if this were like a, we won't get into that. I don't want to go too deep with all this craziness, but affidavit of status is the foundation of all of this. It defines who you are. It says, you know, I am just one below divinity because that's who created me. Any questions about that bit? All right, so let's move on to, all right, I'll show you the little deal that I did with Whole Foods. So that way you can kind of get a feel for how this will work with a school. So with Whole Foods, I sent over this affidavit of fact. So again, another affidavit. This is the president of the Whole Foods Northeast region. So again, you have to swear under penalty of perjury that you're telling the truth. And how I would see this working with a school system is, here's your affidavit of fact, and it would include things like, of course, the top section is basically just a little snippet from the affidavit of status. I am everything I claim, my body, my information, my genetic material, they're my property. So you can't put a mask on me, you can't inject me, you can't take my snot because my snot's my DNA and I own it, it's my property. You know, I don't have a contract with anybody doing business as Whole Foods or anybody doing business as the school board of Toms River. I don't have a contract with you. I never ever signed a contract with you saying that you could do any of these things to my kids. I don't care what the law says. I don't care if you and I don't have a contract, and if there isn't someone on the other end, a person, a man or woman on the other side that I can hold accountable, we don't have a contract. So that's kind of what this top section goes through. So then I go into the details of what happened to me at Whole Foods. January 4th, I called ahead. I spoke to the manager. She told me how I could shop maskless. I went in, anyway, you don't need to read all this, but basically how this would look if you were doing it from a perspective of school. You know, on such and such a date, I received an email saying, you know, my child needed to wear a mask, or on such and such a date, the school board published policy saying that my kid needs to wear a mask. Or, you know, with Rutgers, for example, Rutgers just said that, you know, those kids are going to need a vaccine. So I'll show you what I did with their little announcement. So you just list the facts of how it went down, either how you were notified that this supposed mandatory medical intervention was coming into your life. It's important that, you know, you list things like, so on February 4th, I entered the Red Bank Whole Foods and I was harassed by the greeter to put on a mask. Like, if you're telling me I'm potentially contagious and I need to put on a mask, that's harassment. I can't ask you about your herpes. Like, you can't tell me I have a communicable disease and I need to put a mask on. Like, that's none of your business. So anytime they send you an email, you know, trying to compel you to do something, that's a form of harassment. Like, I know it, you know, oh, but is it really? Yeah, it really is. And you need to start holding their feet to the fire with all this stuff. So, you know, if you want to go down this road, I'll certainly help you put, you know, these things together. So you put together your affidavit of fact explaining what is compelling you to do this particular medical intervention. This is a little longer than I thought it was. So at the bottom here, given the facts provided with, somebody say something? No, okay. So the manager, Renee, under the direction of the president, whoever she is, of Whole Foods, they deprived me of my God-given rights. It resulted in a trespass and harassment against my body. So I moved to rectify it immediately. And then I got this notarized as well. So I sent that off to Whole Foods along with this one. Getting the hang of this, maybe. Offer to settle. Okay. So this is where the good stuff comes in. All right, so they got their affidavit of status. They got their affidavit of fact. So this is who I am. This is what you did to me. This is what we can do about it. So this is a demand for further and better particulars. Basically, I'm giving you a chance to make this right. President of Whole Foods, superintendent, whoever you are, provide me the contract that says that the school board of Toms River has that their policies apply to me, a woman. I'm not a student, I'm not a customer. Show me the contract that says I have to wear a mask in Whole Foods. Show me the contract that I am your property, because the only person that can tell me what to do is whoever I'm property of, either that or I'm a slave, and I know I'm not that. Show me that Whole Foods or Toms River School Board can administer my property without right. Who says that you can tell me what to do? So kind of going down the list of all the things, I'm giving you a chance to give me proof of all this stuff, because if you can prove it to me, then you know what, maybe you're right. But if you can't prove it to me, this is what we're gonna do. I'm prepared to accept any medical intervention. If you wanna give me a shot, okay. First, provide proof that it applies to me as a woman. Provide proof that you have the right to take away my rights and entitlements if I don't get this medical intervention. If I don't put on the mask, prove to me that you have the power to kick me out of your store, because that's against all kinds of discrimination and public accommodation rules and everything that happens in schools as well. So give me the proof. And give me proof of your liability insurance, because if I take this shot and something happens to me, the school board is not a real entity. They're not going to be responsible. I want the liability of the person, the man or the woman that is telling me that my child needs this vaccination. So if it's a superintendent, this letter goes to the superintendent, and the superintendent needs to show you that he has indemnity insurance to indemnify your child should something happen. As soon as you call them on the carpet and make someone personally liable for this stuff, they are like, whoa, I want nothing to do with it. So that's when they're, that's what a contract is. It's an offer, it's acceptance. There has to be equal skin in the game, and there has to be another living person on the other side of it. Because I can't just write something down on a piece of paper and say it applies to you. Like, we got something in the mail from a collection agency the other day because my parents supposedly didn't pay their bill, which is all bogus. But someone just wrote something on a piece of paper and sent it to us. And it's like, no, like, we never had a contract with you. You can't just write something down and make it apply to people. So this is the document that makes them accountable. So here's the kind of that jargon again. I require you to respond in written within 10 days to the affidavit. Each man or woman has to respond point by point within 10 days. If they don't, they basically accept all the liability. And so we've put the liability on them. We've given them a chance to say that it's not their responsibility. Now, if I go into Whole Foods next time and someone harasses me, I've just given them warning that every time someone harasses me, I am sending them a claim for $200,000 per person. I mean, maybe that's a little steep. It's just a mask. But the point is, you have to get their attention and you have to ring the bell of their insurance company. So they're going to show the stuff to an attorney. The school board's going to show the stuff to an attorney. Whole Foods is going to show it to an attorney, and the attorney's going to be like, holy crap, these are affidavits. Like, this person has a little bit of a clue. Like, they might be dangerous, and they're making a claim against, you, that man or woman, for $200,000. We better tell our insurance company, Because anytime and I've seen it because like I said, I've gone through this stuff with the school district and I've requested their insurance policy and it says right at the top, anytime anybody makes a claim against you, you have to tell us. So even if they think this might be just, they're not serious, I'm not serious, I'm not going to follow through, they still have to tell their insurance company. So if one parent sends this off to the school board, if 2 parents or 3 parents do it, we're really going to start getting their attention. So even if you choose not to file the claim, as Jim listens to Alphonse, so he knows, ringing the bell of the insurance company, like we've got to put them on notice that this is a possibility coming down, the pipe. And then we also put in here that, through a formal judicial process, we can take this to court. We can sue them essentially. And, we can put a lien against our house. We can do all kinds of stuff. Once you know a little bit of it, like it gets dangerous, all the stuff you can do to people if you're doing it for the right reasons. Alternately, you're going to give me written proof that my rights and entitlements are mine and I don't need any exemptions. You can't take them away from me because I didn't get a vaccine. So I want that in writing, saying that I don't need a vaccine, I don't need a mask. So that's what I'm hoping to get back from Whole Foods. I'm hoping that they send me a letter or, some document that says, okay, Jessica, you can shop in Whole Foods and you don't need a mask. I'm hoping you guys get a document back from, Tom's River or whatever, saying, okay, your child is exempt from, not exempt, I don't like using that word, but we're not going to touch her, and the bottom point here is kind of basic, but then
Do you file this with the school prior to them? Like, is this filed in response to an action on their part, or is this a proactive filing?
this is preemptive.
Okay.
So we should do
Now,
it in paperwork.
if of course I'm assuming at this point, like they're already having your daughter, wear a mask or whatever.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need to have the affidavit of fact. Like if you kind of know this stuff is coming down the pipe, you can do these things, just the affidavit of status and a notice of liability, like whatever medical intervention, it doesn't matter what it is, a mask, a shot, if they want her to have a physical or whatever, all those things kind of fall under medical intervention. So I say strike first, put them on notice that, what's up rather than kind of doing it the other way around. So
Oh,
I'm just gonna,
Now, if we have friends that are using their religious exemption at this time, can they go ahead and start something like this, even though they already have that on file, and go ahead and start with an affidavit process just in case?
absolutely. I would
Okay.
encourage them to, because I don't think the religious exemption, now that Connecticut's fell, it's
Oh,
not
I know.
long before
They're
we-
coming back again for us.
Yeah. So I would definitely, start on this process because it's, the more you're kind of prepared for it and the more people that they see start to do it, they're going to back off. Like they're going to realize that, wow, we can't pull the wool over these eyes. If there's, 1 or 2 parents doing it, maybe, but if there's a group of folks doing it, they're not going to be able to pull one by. So this is what Alphonse calls a notice of deficiencies and irregularities. And I'm looking at the clock, I'm realizing it's 8:30 already. So I'm going to wrap this up here quick. But this is another really important piece of paperwork because it basically pulls apart everything that they are trying to force people into. So this was the notice from Rutgers on March 25th saying like, we're going to institute the mandatory vaccines. So basically what I did, I just pulled apart, everywhere you see a number here, I have a document that corresponds with why this doesn't apply to me, to my child, my student, whoever. But I'll just swap out the document. So that document goes in line with, not that one. Eventually I'm going to get a better hang of this one. So point 1 is members of the Rutgers community. It's a corporate fiction. Like, what is a member of Rutgers community? Like, can a member of Rutgers community come sit down next to me? No, they don't. They don't have a pulse. Like, if I'm on a desert island, there is nobody there that's that would call themselves the member of Rutgers community. There might be a son or a daughter that considers themselves a member of the Rutgers community, but that entity in itself doesn't exist. So these guys that actually sign the letter, they're going to be running in the other direction, because basically they just took responsibility for, fine, you want to sign the letter, then guess what? The liability is going to you. So I just went through the whole thing and detailed out each one of these things. So the COVID-19 vaccine, that's an important one, right? It's an unapproved medical intervention. I have somebody on the inside that's telling me that Moderna and Pfizer are going to be FDA approved in September. So that's going to kind of change things a little bit. Not much though. But this just picks apart the whole emergency use authorization and, the Nuremberg Code and how clinical trials are ongoing and so on and so forth. So, I mean, you get the gist of this, right? It's just pulling apart everything that they're trying to use against you and explaining to them why it doesn't apply to me or why it's an infringement, a deprivation of my rights. This one I think is really interesting. Immunization requirements for students. If you look up the meaning of the word immunize, it basically just means, to have immunity. It doesn't say that you have to get it through a vaccination. So, and immunity isn't necessarily something you can prove. So the fact that they're trying to say like immunization requirements, it doesn't necessarily mean vaccination. So when I say we've got to use their own tools against them, that's what I'm referring to. I also did the same thing for the state in New Jersey. There's where did it go? I don't know if I'm gonna be able to find it. It's hiding back here. Anyway, I've been talking enough. I think you guys get the gist of it. So what I'm going to send you are the documents that I reviewed. And then I also have a few that apply specifically to like school board related stuff. So the elementary schools, middle schools and such. The statute in New Jersey that says you have to immunize your kids. So I pulled that one apart and did that notice of deficiencies and irregularities. We went over all the paperwork. I'll send you that stuff. And like, if you want to go down this road, like we'll meet and we'll talk like once a week or whatever. Like we'll get to the point where you guys are comfortable, with this stuff, at least as comfortable as I am. Like I said, I'm learning it all too, but I'll let you know what happens with the Whole Foods thing and how much credibility it is, because I don't want to be talking about stuff that I haven't done myself in some way, shape, or form. But I really feel like this is what's going to make a difference. I think this is our one way of getting around some of the stuff. And it just makes sense for so many reasons, because everybody has forgotten what their rights are and who they are. And the time has come for us to remember that stuff. So
Ready.
that's my plan. I'll send you those documents and then we'll stay in touch and we will regroup once you have a chance to review it and go through, any questions you have and make sure you feel good about it.
Okay.
Oh, there's Mario. Hey.
Can I ask a quick question, Jess?
Absolutely, go for it.
So for the Whole Foods one, I have my biggest issue is that right now. So,
oh boy.
So can you send me a copy of that as well? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, because I've been going through the same thing, but I haven't written my affidavit for the experiences I've had.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to go have a real impactful experience, and then write it out.
Yeah, for sure. That's and the one bit of advice, or there's a whole bunch of advice I have, of course, is when you're having these interactions, it's get the name of the person that you're dealing with, because
Okay.
The most important thing is that you have personal responsibility, personal accountability, that whoever it is that's telling you no, that's the person that's liable for what they're doing to you.
Got it.
Even like with the situation with Whole Foods, the girl was so nice, this manager, Renee, she was super, super nice. And I don't want to throw her under the bus. So I'm not going there yet. But if the next time I go into Whole Foods, after they've already gotten this letter saying, look, you're depriving me of my rights, and if you continue to do that, I'm going to hold you accountable. Whoever I meet the next time I go in and they tell me I got to put a mask on, they better look out, because I'm coming at them. I'll give you one.
You're ready.
But having, we've lost that whole personal accountability thing, and we do it every day on social media and all this stuff. Like you just drop a nasty comment and run. No, you've got to start holding people accountable. And
And then the Rutgers paper you're going to share with us too? I didn't see that.
yes, yep, I'll send it over. It's basically whatever document they sent out notifying parents that they were going to be making vaccines mandatory, I just pulled it all apart and explained.
You know, if it's the same for teachers too, or just for the kids?
It's the same for teachers actually, because it says in there, it talks about urging faculty and so forth. I'm
And
pretty
is this
sure
for New Jersey or is it for the whole total US?
it's just for New Jersey, it's just for Rutgers University, but I think you could apply it to almost any, you can take these common phrases
Oh,
like
yeah.
members of the community, students, and you can basically apply it to any situation.
Yeah, I'm just on the border right now. I may quit teaching entirely and just go to charter schools, just because to not deal with it at all, but I'll see how I feel.
We can't run from it though, because it's not.
I know, true.
It's not gonna leave us
Good. It's not good to run. You're right.
alone. All right, I've talked your ear off. Any final questions, concerns? Did I overwhelm y'all?
No, I could
So
listen to it all.
the only thing that I am interested in that you said, and I need to go back and do my own research tonight because I was listening to the NVIC. When I go back and look at both vaccines, when the application was put into the FDA, I have heard, and I'm not going to document it I'm not referencing it in this moment until I go back and look at it. Actually the request was for the vaccine for the study to be lessening the effects of the disease on people, not preventing it. So I am concerned that if they say the FDA is going to approve it, what are they approving it on? And I would love us if we could get a hold of a reporter who would be willing enough before that gets approved to really dig in to what are they approving it based on? Because what I keep having in the healthcare industry, what I keep having problems with is that everyone is taking it on that the vaccine's preventing it. And I mean, that I can't say anything. And that's why I won't take it, because I don't believe it will prevent me from getting it. And I run into trouble. And I'm in a low risk group in many ways of ever having a hard case by the true scientific data that's out there. So, but again, it's the public is being bamboozled with this FDA approval unless we expose or I can have an affidavit that says, oh, it's not FDA approved for what you're at. Work is asking me to do it so that I won't be a risk to my community. Well, wait a minute, that's not true. But if the FDA approves it, I am then, and it's not approved under the right stance, then all of us are in that problem.
And I guess how I would retort that would be, prove to me that I'm a risk. How is a healthy person ever a risk? It's, again, it goes back to that whole, you can't force anything upon me. You can't assume that I'm guilty. And, you're always innocent until proven guilty. I'm always healthy until I'm proven to be sick. So if there's a process, a lawful process for going through that. If you're symptomatic and you're stubborn enough and they have to force you to have quarantine or whatnot, then that's the way it goes. But that's the only lawful way to get someone to prove that somebody's sick.
True. But it's a bigger it's a bigger issue than that. I mean, in that the public is being bamboozled.
Oh yeah,
And
1,000%. Absolutely.
on the vaccine alone, I mean, it's just such a simple thing. I mean, it's actually so simple right now. If somebody would take that, because I don't know how they can FDA approve it. What are they approving?
Am I wrong in saying that? I mean, I've looked into the FDA before the approval itself. everything that I've read, it looks like the FDA just reviews the data given to them by the manufacturer over the trial
Right.
period. And that's how the
But the
FDA.
trial had no as I understand it, and I could be wrong on this, has no specificity for prevention of disease. It only had specificity for having a lesser
Case.
case and a lesser death rate.
Mhm.
Yeah, and they're ongoing until 2022 and 2023.
Right. Yeah. So safety's ongoing. It's not proven to. So right there, I mean, Deb, that's a good point. All the statutes say immunization. The vaccine does not make you immune. It just lessens
No.
your experience. So right there on its face,
Mhm.
it's not lining up. And then I absolutely see what you're saying. Like it's a medical product. It's technically not even a vaccine, you know, so there are so many things that are wrong with it, which is even more reason why, you know, if we start this push now, hopefully they'll, you know, a few people will start the avalanche, and by the time they're trying to FDA approve it, there'll just be too much resistance. And that's my hope anyway. I do have hope, honestly. That's the one thing that I want to say. I'm as crazy as things are right now, I absolutely have hope, because there's a lot of people that are really jumping on board with this stuff. So
Just kind of-
I will talk with you later.
all right. Okay, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Thank you, Jess.
everything.
Shout out when you need something, and I'll send you those documents either tonight or tomorrow.
Okay.
All right, sounds great.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Good night.